So now let's switch gears, and I'm going to take you through a sample essay, just so you can, again, see how I think and what I look for as I go through an essay. So this is one that's on this week's page, and it is an analysis of brownies. So I'm looking at it here. I noticed that the spacing looks correct. Everything is double spaced with no additional spacing. A common error that you see sometimes is people add extra space between the title and the body. That's not necessary. Just regular double spacing from beginning all the way to the end of the paper. You'll notice there's no extra spacing between paragraphs. What denotes a new paragraph is the indentation, so I don't need that extra space between paragraphs. So again, I'm just kind of looking, checking spacing. Everything looks good. I'm thinking about MLA formatting here. Everything looks right. And then I notice on the last page is the works cited entry. Again, it's just regular double spacing, no extra spacing between the title of the works cited page and between the entry. So this is looking good so far in terms of MLA formatting. I'm scrolling back up to the top. I notice the student's name here, followed by the professor's name, followed by the class, followed by the date. That is all the correct order. I also notice that it's the international date format, which MLA requests. So it has the day, followed by the month, followed by the year, with no comma anywhere in that. I also notice up here in the top right corner is the student's last name, followed by the page number. And that is going to appear on every page, last name and page number. A hint, do not try to use the tab button to work your way over to do this. Use the insert page number function on your word processing program. If you try to use tab or space it over, it's not going to be in the right place. So use insert and then find page number and insert it in the top right hand corner of the document. Then you can just go in and double tap next to it and insert your last name, and it'll appear on every page. Okay, so I'm looking at the title here, Thin Mints Against Oppression. It's kind of funny, right? It's a play on brownies and Girl Scouts and the cookies that they sell. If you're not familiar with Thin Mints, it's one of the types of cookies that you see once in a while at Girl Scout cookie sales. Delicious cookies. Not as good as the Do-si-dos in my opinion, the peanut butter ones, but a strong cookie. So yeah, it's kind of a clever play on the title of the story. However, it's not really previewing the paper's argument. So it's a decent title. Probably could preview the paper's argument a little more effectively. I'm noticing the capitalization of major words in the title is correct. Prepositions generally aren't capitalized, but kind of an exception to that rule is prepositions that are 2 syllables or more can be capitalized. Okay, I'm noticing also that the title is not the same title as the story itself. Do not title your paper the same as the title of the story. That title's been taken. Okay, so I'm just going to start through it. ZZ Packer explores root issues in society through her collection of fictional stories, Drinking Coffee Elsewhere. Okay, so this is good. Titles of major works, basically books, newspapers, albums, are in italics in MLA. However, titles of short stories should be contained in quotation marks, not in italics. So kind of a rule of thumb, major works are italicized. Minor works that are contained within major works are in quotation marks. So, for example, an album should be in italics. A song that's contained on the album should be in quotation marks. A newspaper should be in italics. An article contained in the newspaper should be in quotation marks. Okay. Brownies, in particular, exposes mankind's predisposition to struggle for power. Okay. So this is kind of getting right to the content of the paper. It's not using one of the hooks that are discussed in the literary analysis PowerPoint, which seems to be working fine in this case. You do have that choice. You can use a hook if you want to. Now I'm also noticing that it uses the term mankind, which I consider to be sexist, so I'd probably recommend to this author humankind's predisposition to struggle for power. But let's keep going. Set in the Brownie Scout camp in the 1980s called Camp Crescendo, it chronicles a dramatic exchange between a black Brownie troop and a white troop, Troop 909. The girls of the black troop are enraged when rumor spreads that Troop 909 had called one of their troop the N-word, which hurls the reader into their plot to teach 909 a lesson. So nice, succinct summary here that focuses on just preparing the reader for the analysis that's to come. Just a couple sentences that, again, focuses on something about power and the struggle for power. So you don't have to provide an elaborate summary, just enough to get the reader prepared for the paper's argument. Packer consumes the narrative with an examination of how power is balanced in social interactions, even in the case of fourth grade scouts. So now we're transitioning into the thesis statement. Packer argues, okay, that's good, it's identifying the argument, that societal power hierarchies that manifest even in children's social interactions are struggles between in-groups and out-groups to exploit or to gain dominance. So that's identifying the argument, successfully describing her position on the human need for control and the effects of exerting power and resisting. So, and it also provides a little bit of evaluation of how, to what degree she does this successfully. So this is good. Seems pretty clear what the identification of what the author's argument is, as well as this paper's author's evaluation of that argument. If anything, I might say that the thesis is a little bit wordy and uses some kind of vague language a little bit, but generally a pretty good thesis and very original, I would say. So let's keep moving. Packer argues that hierarchies of power or systems of organization based on social authority create a relationship of in-groups and out-groups where one has supremacy over the other. Pretty clear point, relates to the thesis, and I've read the paper before, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It does a pretty good job of previewing what this paragraph's point is. So a pretty good topic sentence here. Now it's going to start expanding on that. In-groups can be described as units of individuals and have solidarity with one another based on immutable traits or shared characteristics. Out-groups, with respect to the in-group, are units of individuals who are dissimilar to them. I'm kind of doing a little bit of definition here to help the reader understand the point that's being made. In fiction, the groups can be distinguished through dialogue or rhetoric used to describe the out-group in a negative light, often from the biased perspective of protagonists, whether justified or not. Historically, this narrative is strongly exemplified by racial groups in America, more specifically black and white Americans. So now we're moving from a little bit of elaboration on the point into how this is shown in the story. Packer introduces the animosity between the two groups through the black Brownie troop posed as the in-group, asserting the white group as the out-group, saying, and then we have the quote, "They smell like chihuahuas, wet chihuahuas, Caucasian chihuahuas," Arnetta said. That did it. The girls in my troop turned elastic. They could not stop laughing. Now we do see that there is a technical error here. This should have a comma following saying, and it should have a capital T, like we just talked about with the methods for integrating a quote. Generally, I think it does a pretty good job of providing context. I might add a little bit more, because this does take place on a school playground, if I remember right. So I might, and in a flashback, so I might clarify that in part of the sentence that's leading into the quote. So I might say, Packer introduces, or maybe at the beginning of this, through a flashback in which the narrator recalls an instance at her school, comma, Packer introduces the animosity, ... So that might help remind the reader just a little bit more about what's happening at the time of this quote. So let's keep going. The in-group of black Brownie troops illuminates their hostility toward the out-group by making their defining characteristic, being white, an insult. In-groups strengthen their affinity for their members by outcasting the out-group as lower in the power structure. This rhetoric of the characters serves as the backbone of Packer's descriptions of the places that people claim within the hierarchy. So it's moved from an example from the text back out to a broader explanation as it relates to the thesis. So keep in mind a strong analytical body paragraph will generally make a point, provide some supporting information from the text, and then broaden back out to the explanation, kind of coming back to the point that was made in the topic sentence. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the entire essay, but I did want to take you through one body paragraph to show how we move from a broader point to specific supporting information and then back out to a broader explanation, returning back to the point that was made in the beginning of the paragraph. So generally, a pretty good paragraph. Again, I would recommend a little more context before the quote, fixing some of the punctuation and capitalization issues there, but generally a pretty strong paragraph. Okay, and you'll notice that the next paragraph dives into a new point, but again, I'm not going to go through all that. So we will stop there. Again, I just wanted to give you a quick look at how I approach an essay when I'm grading it.